Mafia Boss offered the female black waitress a $1 billion deal because she's secretly in love with the girl. A Mafia Boss slid $5 billion across a mahogany table to a waitress who'd serve him scotch for 3 years, and she had no idea he'd been in love with her since the day he watched her bury her mother in the rain. The crystal chandeliers of the Meridian restaurant cast light like broken promises across tables where America's most dangerous men pretended to be civilized. Mitchelle Andy had learned to read the room the way a sailor reads the sea: one wrong move and you drown in waters you never saw coming. Table 7 was always the storm. Lucky Bryan sat at the center of his crew like a king among jesters, though jesters didn't typically carry guns under $1,000 suits. Dante flanked his right, all muscle and paranoia. Vincent held the left, sharp-eyed and sharper-tongued. Behind them, for more men whose names Mitchell had never learned and didn't want to know. They came every Thursday at 8, stayed until midnight, and tipped exactly 20%, no more, no less. Professional courtesy from professional criminals. Another scotch, Mr. Bryan. Michelle's voice was steady, practiced. 3 years of serving Lucky Bryan had taught her the art of being simultaneously present and invisible, a magic trick performed nightly by service workers across America. Mitchell. His voice stopped her mid-turn, and the room seemed to hold its breath. The conversations at neighboring tables dimmed as if someone had turned down the volume on reality itself. Stay a moment. Her pulse hammered against her ribs like a prisoner testing bars. In 3 years, he'd never asked her to stay. Never looked at her the way he was looking at her now, like she was an equation he was finally ready to solve. Sir. Lucky Bryan reached beneath the table and retrieved a black leather folder. The movement was unhurried, deliberate, the kind of gesture men make when they're about to change someone's life and want to savor the moment. He slid it across the mahogany surface toward her. Dante's hand moved instinctively toward his jacket. Vincent's eyes narrowed. The 4 nameless men shifted like wolves sensing blood. Open it, Lucky Bryan said. Michelle's hands trembled as she lifted the cover. Inside, a single document. Her eyes scanned the text, catching on words that didn't belong together: her name, real estate development, Southside Investment, partnership agreement. And then the number. $5 billion. The folder slipped from her fingers, catching on the table's edge. This is real. He leaned forward, and for the first time she noticed the silver threading through his dark hair, the lines around his eyes that suggested he'd smiled more in another life. It's a business proposal. I want to develop the South Side. Build it into something that actually serves the people who live there, not the vultures who want to gentrify it into oblivion. And I want you to run it. Dante coughed, or possibly choked. Vincent's expression suggested he was reconsidering his life choices. Why me? The question escaped before Mitchell could cage it. I'm a waitress. I serve drinks and memorize orders and go home to a studio apartment that smells like the Indian restaurant downstairs. I'm nobody. You're the woman who takes night classes after double shifts. Lucky Bryan's voice carried a weight that had nothing to do with volume. Who splits her tips with Rosa because her son needs new shoes? Who convinced Mr. Chen not to sell his building to developers who'd turn it into luxury condos and push out everyone who'd lived there for 30 years? He paused, his gaze holding hers with an intensity that made her skin prickle. You know that neighborhood. You love it. That's worth more than a Harvard MBA and a trust fund combined. Behind him, his crew exchanged glances that ranged from bewildered to betrayed. This wasn't the Lucky Bryan they knew, the man who'd built an empire on fear and force, who'd survived assassination attempts through paranoia and preemptive violence. There has to be a catch. Michelle's voice found its strength. 28 years of poverty had taught her that nothing good came without a price, and the price was usually higher than advertised. There is. Lucky Bryan's jaw tightened, and suddenly he looked exactly like what he was, a 40-year-old man tired of being a monster. The money comes with conditions. You control how it's spent. You make every decision. I'm just a financier. If you walk away, you take everything. The contract's ironclad. What would you do if someone handed you the power to save your neighborhood, but the money came from blood? Drop your thoughts below. Mitchell stared at the document like it might bite her. $5 billion. The number didn't even make sense. It was the kind of wealth that existed only in news articles about tech billionaires and oil sheiks, not in the hands of waitresses who counted pennies for bus fare. I need to know why. She looked up, meeting Lucky Bryan's eyes directly for the first time in 3 years. The real reason. Not the business pitch. Why me? Really? Something flickered across his face, pain, maybe, or the shadow of a memory he'd tried to bury. He reached for his scotch, but didn't drink. Just hold it, watching the amber liquid catch the light. 12 years ago, I attended a funeral in the South Side. His voice had gone quiet, and his crew leaned in despite themselves. I was there on business. Collecting a debt from a shop owner who'd gotten creative with his accounting. It was raining, one of those cold October rains that feels like the sky's punishing you for something. Michelle's breath caught. October. 12 years ago. No. There was a girl standing outside the funeral home, Lucky Bryan continued, his eyes distant now, looking at something only he could see. Maybe 16, 17. Alone. Everyone else had gone inside, but she was just standing there in the rain, reading a book. I remember thinking it was the strangest thing, who reads at their own mother's funeral? The room had gone completely silent. Even the ambient noise from the kitchen seemed to have stopped, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. I asked someone who she was. They said her mother had just died. Some disease that rich people cure with a phone call and a credit card, but poor people die from because America's funny that way. He finally took that drink, draining half the glass. The girl was reading because she was waiting. Because she'd learned that knowledge was the only thing they couldn't take from her. Because even in the worst moment of her life, she refused to stop fighting. Mitchell's hands had gone numb. She remembered that day. Remembered standing in the rain with a water-damaged library book about business management, too proud to cry in front of people she barely knew, too angry at the world to go inside and pretend her mother's death made any kind of sense. I paid off her mother's medical bills that day, Lucky Bryan said. Anonymously. Told myself it was charity. That I'd forget about her. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. I didn't forget. When she turned 25 and needed work, I made sure she got a job here. Told myself I was just helping. Just keeping an eye on someone who'd had a rough start. You've been watching me. Mitchell's voice was flat, but underneath, something was beginning to crack. For 12 years. You've been watching me. Yes. No apology, no justification. Just the truth, laid bare like a wound. Dante cleared his throat. Boss, maybe we should. Shut up, Dante. Lucky Bryan didn't even look at him. His eyes were locked on Mitchell's, and there was something desperate in them now, something raw. You want to know why you? Because you're everything I stopped believing in. Because watching you split your tips and help old ladies with their groceries and study for classes you take after working 12-hour shifts makes me think that maybe, this world isn't completely rotten. That's not love, Mitchell said, her voice shaking. That's an obsession. I know what it is. He cut her off, and suddenly he looked older than 40. It looked ancient. I know I have no right. I know this is insane. But that money? It's real. The contract's real. And it's yours whether you want anything to do with me or not. Use it to build something good. Use it to prove that not everything I touch turns to poison. Mitchell picked up the folder with trembling hands. Inside, beneath the contract, was a photograph. Old, creased, like it had been carried in a wallet for years. It showed a girl standing in the rain, holding a book, her face turned slightly away from the camera. Her. You took a picture, she whispered. I take a lot of pictures of things I can't have. Lucky Brian stood abruptly, and his crew scrambled to follow. You have 24 hours to decide. Sign the contract, don't sign it, burn it, I don't care. But that money's going to the South Side one way or another. I'd just prefer if you were the one wielding it. He walked toward the exit, his men forming a protective formation around him. At the door, he stopped, looked back. For what it's worth, Mitchell. You were right to keep reading that day. Knowledge is the only thing they can't take from you. Then he was gone, leaving her standing in the middle of the meridian with $5 billion in her hands and a photograph of the worst day of her life. Mitchell stood frozen in the middle of the meridian for exactly 47 seconds, she counted them, because counting kept her from screaming. Around her, the restaurant had resumed its careful choreography of wealth and privilege, but she felt like she was standing in a different universe entirely. Girl, you okay? Rosa appeared at her elbow, concern etched across her weathered face. The kitchen manager had taken Mitchelle under her wing 3 years ago, the way she'd mothered every lost soul who'd ever worked at the Meridian. Mitchell looked down at the folder in her hands. Rosa, have you ever had something so big happen that your brain just refuses to process it? I've had 4 kids and 3 husbands. I know it's big. Rosa peered at the folder. What did the scary man give you? A nervous breakdown wrapped in legal documents. Mitchell laughed, and it came out slightly hysterical. I need to sit down. They retreated to the kitchen's back corner, where Rosa kept a small table for staff breaks. Mitchell spread the contract out, her hands still shaking. The legal language swam before her eyes, but certain phrases leaped out like accusers: sole discretionary authority, irrevocable trust, $5 billion United States dollars. Dios mío, Rosa breathed, crossing herself. That's not a typo. Apparently not. Mitchell pulled out the photograph, stared at her 17-year-old self. He's been watching me, Rosa. For 12 years. He paid my mother's medical bills. Got me this job. And I never knew. Rosa was quiet for a moment, her expression unreadable. You know what's funny about powerful men? They think surveillance is the same thing as love. They think watching you struggle from their tower is the same as actually helping. He did help though. The medical bills. After your mother was already dead. Rosa's voice was gentle but firm. Mija, I'm not saying he's evil. I'm saying he's a man who built an empire on violence and now wants to buy his way into heaven through you. The question is, are you willing to be his redemption? Mitchell thought about the South Side. About Mr. Chen's building and the corner store that kept getting robbed because there were no street lights. About the playground where kids played on broken equipment because the city had forgotten they existed. About her mother, who died because being poor in America was apparently a capital offense. What if I could actually fix things, she whispered. What if this money could make the difference between another girl losing her mother and... Then you take the money and you run so fast he can't catch you. Rosa gripped her hand. You use it for good, but you don't let him use you. Understand? The studio apartment smelled like tikka masala and old dreams. Mitchell dropped her bag by the door and stood in the center of her one-room life, contract still clutched in her hands. Everything she owned could fit in 3 suitcases. Everything. And now some mafia boss wanted to hand her $5 billion because he'd fallen in love with her grief. The absurdity of it hit her all at once, and she started laughing. Laughing until tears streamed down her face, until she couldn't tell if she was laughing or crying or having some kind of breakdown that was probably long overdue. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. You're probably spiraling right now. That's normal. But consider this, that money exists whether you touch it or not. I made it through means you'd probably find morally questionable. You can let it sit in an account making bankers rich, or you can use it to build something that matters. Your choice. LB. She stared at the message. He was right, which was infuriating. The money existed. It had been made, through whatever dark channels mafia bosses used, and it wasn't going to unmake itself just because she had ethical qualms. Another text arrived. Also, for the record, I don't expect anything from you. No dates, no gratitude, no absolution for my sins. I just want to see if something good can grow from rotten soil. Consider it an experiment in redemption. Or don't. Like I said, your choice. Mitchell walked to her window, looked out at the south side sprawling in the darkness. Somewhere out there, some other girl was probably losing her mother right now. Some other family was choosing between medicine and rent. Some other kid was learning that poverty wasn't just about money, it was about a system designed to make sure you stayed exactly where you were born. She picked up her phone and typed. I want to meet tomorrow. Not at the Meridian. Somewhere public. Somewhere in the South Side. And I'm bringing a lawyer. The response came immediately. Fair enough. Chen's Coffee Shop, 2 p.m. I'll buy you something that isn't scotch. Despite herself, Mitchell smiled. You'd better bring more than coffee to convince me you're not completely insane. Insanity's relative. See you at 2. Chen's Coffee Shop sat on the corner of Maple and 3rd, a survivor of 30 years of economic collapse, gang violence, and gentrification attempts. Mr. Chen, the same Mr. Chen whose building Mitchell had helped save, ran it with the stubborn dignity of a man who'd seen empires rise and fall from behind a coffee counter. Mitchell arrived 15 minutes early with Jasmine Rodriguez, a lawyer she'd found through her night school program. Jasmine specialized in community development law and had agreed to review the contract for the price of lunch and the entertainment value of watching a waitress negotiate with a mob boss. This is either the best decision you'll ever make or the worst, Jasmine said, spreading the contract across a corner table. Possibly both simultaneously. That's helpful, thanks. I'm serious though, Mitchell. Jasmine looked up, her expression grave. This contract is airtight. He's giving you complete control with zero strings attached. In 15 years of practicing law, I've never seen anything like it. It's either the most generous offer in history or the most elaborate trap. Which do you think it is? Honestly? I think it's a desperate man trying to buy something money can't purchase. Jasmine tapped the signature line. The question is whether you're willing to let him try. The door chimed. Lucky Brian entered alone, no crew, no bodyguards, just a 40-year-old man in jeans and a simple black shirt looking profoundly out of place in his own neighborhood. Mr. Chen looked up from behind the counter, recognition flickering across his face, followed by something harder to read. Mr. Brian, Chen said carefully. Long time. Too long, Chen. Coffee still the best in the city? Better. I don't water it down for rich people anymore. There was an edge to Chen's voice, but also something like grudging respect. Lucky Brian smiled, a real smile that transformed his face entirely. Fair enough. I'll take whatever she's having. He nodded toward Mitchell. He slid into the seat across from her, and suddenly the small table felt impossibly intimate. Up close, without the armor of the Meridian's ambience and his crew's presence, he looked almost ordinary. Almost. You came alone, Mitchell observed. You asked for public. Bringing 6 armed men seemed counterproductive. He glanced at Jasmine. You must be the lawyer. Jasmine Rodriguez. And before we start, I need to ask, is this money legally obtained? Lucky Brian laughed, sharp and bitter. Define legally. I've paid my taxes, if that's what you're asking. Where the money originally came from? That's a longer conversation about American capitalism and the fine line between legitimate business and organized crime. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting. His voice hardened slightly. The money's clean now. It's been laundered through enough legitimate businesses that the IRS itself couldn't trace it back to anything prosecutable. Will that work for you, counselor? Jasmine and Mitchell exchanged glances. It'll have to, Jasmine said. Mr. Chen appeared with coffee, dark, rich, served in chipped mugs that had probably been there since the shop opened. He set them down carefully, then lingered. Are you really giving money to the neighborhood? Chen asked Lucky Brian directly. Or is this some kind of game? No game, Chen. I'm tired of watching this place die while I sit in restaurants that cost more per meal than most people here make in a week. Lucky Brian met the old man's gaze steadily. I want to build something that lasts. Something that actually helps. Chen studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. My grandfather used to say, a tree grown from poisoned soil can still bear good fruit, but you need the right gardener. He looked at Mitchell. You're a good gardener, girl. Don't let his poison infect the roots. After Chen left, silence settled over the table. Mitchell wrapped her hands around her mug, drawing courage from its warmth. I have conditions, she said finally. I expected nothing less. First, this isn't about you and me. Whatever you feel, whatever you think you feel, it stays separate from the work. This is business, not romance. Agreed. Second, I want complete transparency. Every dollar accounted for. Every decision is documented. If I even suspect you're using this to launder more money or gain influence, I walk away and you keep everything. It's already in the contract. Third, Mitchell leaned forward, her voice dropping. You tell me the truth. Right now. Why now? Why, after 12 years of watching from the shadows, are you doing this now? Lucky Brian was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw. Because 6 months ago, I got diagnosed with a heart condition. The doctors give me 5 years, maybe 10 if I'm lucky. And I realized I've spent 40 years building an empire of fear, and when I die, all I'll leave behind is blood and money. He met her eyes. I want to leave something better. Even if it kills me faster. The coffee in Mitchell's mug had gone cold. She stared at Lucky Brian, trying to reconcile the man sitting across from her, vulnerable, mortal, dying, with the legend she'd served scotch to for 3 years. You're dying, she said flatly. And this is your deathbed conversion. I prefer to think of it as aggressive life reorganization. A ghost of his usual sardonic humor flickered across his face. But yes, essentially. Jasmine shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Brian, I need to ask, does this diagnosis affect the legal standing of the contract? Are there estate issues we should? The trust is irrevocable. Even if I die tomorrow, the money's hers. My estate can't touch it. My crew can't touch it. The federal government can't touch it, though they'd love to try. He pulled out another folder, this one thick with medical documents. My lawyers have been thorough. Paranoid, even. It's what I pay them for. Mitchell took the folder but didn't open it. You think throwing money at your mortality makes you noble? No. His voice was quiet. I think it makes me desperate. There's a difference. Why should I trust you? The question burst out of her, raw and sharp. You've lied by omission for 12 years. You've built your fortune on violence. For all I know, this whole thing is some elaborate scheme to... To what? Lucky Brian leaned back, spread his hands. I'm giving you complete control. No oversight. No conditions. If I wanted to manipulate you, I'd have structured this differently. Given you just enough to make you dependent. Made myself indispensable. He paused. I'm doing the opposite. I'm making myself irrelevant. Nobody gives away $5 billion to make themselves irrelevant, Jasmine interjected. People facing death do strange things, counselor. We chase redemption like drowning men chase air. Mr. Chen returned, refilling their mugs without asking. He set down a plate of almond cookies, his wife's recipe, famous throughout the South Side. In Chinese philosophy, Chen said, unprompted, we have a concept, yuan fun. It means destiny, but not fate. It means the right people meeting at the right time for the right reasons, even if those reasons aren't clear yet. He looked between Mitchell and Lucky Bryan. Sometimes poisoned roots grow healing trees. Sometimes they just spread more poison. Time reveals everything. After he left, Mitchell picked up a cookie, turned it over in her hands. Her mother used to bring these home when she worked late shifts at the factory. They'd sit at their tiny table, splitting one cookie between them because money was tight, and her mother would say, someday, baby girl, we'll buy the whole box. Her mother never got to buy the whole box. I'll do it, Mitchell said suddenly. But not for you. For every mother who died because healthcare in America is reserved for people who can afford to live. For every kid playing on broken playground equipment. For every Mr. Chen watching their neighborhood die while developers circle like vultures. I wouldn't want it any other way. And you stay out of it. I make the decisions. I choose the projects. You're just the bank account. Agreed. One more thing. Mitchell leaned forward, her voice steel. The second I think you're using this for anything other than what you've promised, the second I catch you leveraging this money for influence or power or whatever mobsters leverage things for, I burn it all down. I'll give every penny to charity and make sure the whole world knows Lucky Bryan's redemption arc was bullshit. Understand? For the first time since entering Chen's, Lucky Bryan smiled, genuinely smiled, the kind of expression that suggested he'd just found exactly what he was looking for. You know what I've always admired about you, Mitchell? You don't negotiate like someone who has nothing to lose. You negotiate like someone who knows exactly how much they're worth. He extended his hand across the table. Deal. Mitchell looked at his hand. Looked at Jasmine, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Looked at Mr. Chen, who was watching from behind the counter with an expression that might have been approved. She thought about her mother. About 12-year-old promises made in the rain. About every double shift and night class and moment of exhaustion that had led her to this impossible crossroads. She took his hand. Deal. But Bryan? She gripped harder than necessary, felt him wince slightly. If you're lying to me, if this is some game, I promise you, I'll make your last 5 years so miserable you'll beg for that heart condition to finish you faster. He laughed, actually laughed, loud enough that other patrons turned to stare. Now there's the South Side girl I remember. Welcome to the most expensive partnership in American history, Ms. Andy. Try not to spend it all in one place. If you suddenly had the power to rebuild your community but the money came from someone's dark past, could you separate the gift from the giver? Tell us what you'd do below. Chapter 6, The Devil's Arithmetic. The first war council happened in the least likely place imaginable, Mitchell's studio apartment, where the lingering scent of tikka masala competed with fresh coffee and the weight of impossible decisions. Jasmine had brought her business partner, Trevor Kim, an urban development specialist who'd spent 10 years watching the South Side crumble under predatory lending and municipal neglect. Lucky Bryan had arrived alone again, looking profoundly uncomfortable perched on Mitchell's second-hand futon. This is cozy, he said, glancing around the 400-square-foot space that contained Mitchell's entire existence. This is reality for most of us, Mitchell shot back. Welcome to how the other 99% lives. Trevor spread a map of the South Side across her coffee table, a battered IKEA piece she'd found on a curb 3 years ago. Red circles marked condemned buildings. Blue highlighted areas with the highest poverty rates. Yellow showed where developers had already started buying properties for pennies on the dollar. The South Side is dying from 1,000 cuts, Trevor said, tapping the map. But here's what most people don't understand, it's not an accident. It's by design. Banks won't lend here. Insurance companies charge triple. The city routes all infrastructure money elsewhere. It's economic strangulation with a smile. So we strangle back, Lucky Bryan said. With 5 billion smiles. It's not that simple. Jasmine pulled out her laptop. If we just throw money at the problem, we'll trigger a feeding frenzy. Every vulture with a real estate license will descend. Property values will spike. We'll accidentally gentrify the place we're trying to save, pushing out the very people we want to help. Mitchell felt her stomach drop. So what do? We get creative. Trevor grinned like a man about to explain his favorite chess gambit. We don't buy buildings. We buy the mortgages. We don't build new housing. We repair existing housing and make it actually affordable. We don't attract outside businesses. We fund local ones. We become a shadow government that actually gives a damn. That's going to piss off the actual government, Lucky Bryan observed. Good. Mitchell surprised herself with the venom in her voice. The actual government let my mother die. Let this whole neighborhood rot. Let children grow up thinking poverty is their inheritance instead of their robbery. So yes, let's piss them off. Lucky Bryan studied her with an expression she couldn't quite read. You know what's dangerous about you, Mitchell? You've got rage in you. Clean, focused rage. That's how revolutions start. Is that a warning or a compliment? Both. They worked through the night, mapping out a strategy that felt equal parts brilliant and insane. Phase 1, buy up the mortgages on condemned buildings before they could be seized and sold to developers. Phase 2, create a community land trust that would keep housing permanently affordable. Phase 3, fund a small business incubator that would give South Side residents the capital to compete with corporate chains. This is going to make you enemies, Jasmine warned around midnight, her third coffee in hand. Real enemies. The kind with lawyers and political connections. I've got enemies with guns and sociopathic tendencies, Lucky Bryan said mildly. I'm not worried about lawyers. You should be. Lawyers can take years off your life with paperwork alone. Good thing I've only got 5 years to lose. The room went quiet. It was the first time he'd referenced his diagnosis since Chen's coffee shop, and the casual way he said it made Mitchell's chest tighten uncomfortably. We're going to need a name, Trevor said, breaking the tension. For the foundation. Something that signals what we're about. They tossed around ideas. South Side Renaissance Fund. Community Equity Trust. People First Initiative. Everything sounded either too corporate or too naive. What about the Second Chance Foundation? Mitchell said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. For people like my mother, who never got one. For neighborhoods that deserve another shot. For. She glanced at Lucky Bryan, for anyone trying to build something better from broken pieces. Lucky Bryan's expression did something complicated. I like it. Though I don't deserve to be included in that anyone. That's not your call anymore. Mitchell met his eyes. You gave me the money. I decide what it means. At 2 a.m., after Trevor and Jasmine had left, Lucky Bryan lingered at the door. The city sprawled below them through her single window, a constellation of broken streetlights and stubborn hope. Thank you, he said simply. For what? For not making this easy on me. For making me earn even the smallest piece of redemption. He paused. Your mother would be proud of you, you know. You didn't know my mother. No. But I knew a girl who read books in the rain at her mother's funeral. That kind of strength doesn't come from nowhere. After he left, Mitchell stood at her window, watching the South Side sleep. Somewhere out there, $5 billion was waiting to either save everything or destroy it. She picked up her phone and texted Rosa, I think I just started a revolution. Please tell me I'm not insane. The response came immediately, Mija, all the best revolutionaries are a little insane. Now get some sleep. You've got a neighborhood to save. The first domino fell on a Tuesday. Mitchell was at the Meridian. She'd kept her job despite Jasmine's protests, partly because she needed the normalcy, partly because quitting would signal weakness, when Dante walked in without Lucky Bryan. That had never happened before. He approached her station with the careful deliberation of a man delivering bad news. "We need to talk." "Not here." "Chen's, 20 minutes." "Where's?" "That's what we need to talk about." Chen's coffee shop was emptier than usual. Mr. Chen took one look at Dante's face and retreated to the kitchen, leaving them alone. Dante ordered nothing, just sat with his hands folded on the table like he was praying or preparing for violence. With him, it was often hard to tell the difference. "The family's splitting," he said without preamble. "Vincent thinks the boss has lost his mind. Says giving you that money makes us look weak. Half the crew agrees with him." Mitchell's blood went cold. "And the other half?" "Thinks the boss is dying and deserves to spend his last years however he wants, even if it's insane." Dante's jaw tightened. "I'm in the second camp." "Barely." "What does Lucky Bryan say?" "That's the problem. He doesn't care. Says if they want to leave, they can leave. Says he's done building his legacy on fear." Dante leaned forward, and for the first time, Mitchell saw genuine fear in his eyes. "You don't understand what that means. In our world, showing weakness gets you killed. And he's basically painting a target on his back with your name on the bullet. That's not my fault. Isn't it?" Dante's voice was sharp. "You took his money. You took his protection. You think that doesn't have consequences? Vincent's already making moves. Talking to the Russians, the Colombians. He's building a coalition to take over once the boss is too weak to fight back." Mitchell felt the world tilting sideways. She'd been so focused on saving the South Side that she hadn't considered she might be destroying something else. "Someone else. What do you want me to do? Give the money back. Tell him you changed your mind. Let him save face before this whole thing collapses into a war that'll make the 90s look like a playground fight." "I can't do that." The words came out stronger than she felt. "Do you know how many families that money could help? How many kids could get healthcare, education, an actual future? And how many families will lose fathers and sons when the streets run red because their boss lost his edge?" Dante stood abruptly. "I like you, Mitchell. You're a good person. But good people get people killed in my world. Think about that." He left her sitting alone with cold coffee and a crisis she had no idea how to solve. She found Lucky Bryan at his penthouse, an address Dante had reluctantly provided. The building was all glass and steel, the kind of place that made studio apartments like hers seem like temporary delusions rather than homes. He answered the door in a t-shirt and sweatpants, looking more tired than she'd ever seen him. Without the armor of expensive suits and restaurant lighting, he looked exactly like what he was, a sick man trying to outrun mortality. "Dante talked to you," he said. "Not a question. Your empire's falling apart." "Good." He stepped aside to let her in. The penthouse was surprisingly sparse, expensive furniture that looked barely used, walls that held no photographs or personal touches. It was a place to exist, not to live. It was always going to fall apart. "I just moved up the timeline. People are going to die, Bryan." She'd stopped calling him Lucky, she realized. "When did that happen?" "Vincent's planning something." Dante's terrified. "And you're acting like this is all some philosophical exercise instead of real people's lives. You think I don't know that?" His voice cracked. "You think I haven't spent every night since I handed you that contract calculating casualties? But here's what you're not understanding, Mitchell, people were already dying. They've been dying for 20 years under my leadership. At least this way, some good might come from the collapse. That's not noble. That's suicidal. Maybe it's both." He moved to the window, staring out at the city that had made and would probably kill him. I've had cancer in this city for decades. You're the chemotherapy. Painful, destructive, but necessary. If I have to die for the treatment to work, so be it. I didn't sign up to be your executioner. No. You signed up to save the South Side. Sometimes those things come packaged together. Mitchell wanted to scream. Wanted to throw the contract in his face and walk away from this entire beautiful, terrible mess. But she thought about Mr. Chen's building. About Rosa's son who needed new shoes every month because kids grow fast and poverty grows faster. About her mother, reading medical bills she could never pay while death waited patiently in the corner. If I keep the money, she said slowly, and your world burns because of it, that's on both of us. Yes. And you're okay with that? Lucky Brian turned from the window, and his smile was the saddest thing she'd ever seen. I stopped being okay with anything a long time ago. Now I'm just trying to make the ending mean something. The explosion happened at 3 a.m. on a Friday, shattering the windows of Chen's coffee shop and sending a message that could be read from space, back off or burn. Mitchell got the call from Mr. Chen himself, his voice shaking but steady. We're okay. My wife, me, we're okay. But the shop. She was there in 15 minutes, still in her pajamas, Rosa beside her because she'd called her second. The street was chaotic, fire trucks, police, neighbors in bathrobes. The coffee shop's front was gone, replaced by blackened brick and broken glass that caught the emergency lights like scattered stars. Mr. Chen stood on the sidewalk, his wife wrapped in a blanket, both of them staring at 30 years of work reduced to ash and rubble. Vincent, Dante said, appearing beside Mitchell like a dark ghost. He's sending a message. Stop the South Side project or he'll burn it all down. Starting with anyone associated with you. Where's Brian? Handling it. His way. Dante's expression was grim. Which means bodies by morning. No. Mitchell grabbed his arm. No more bodies. No more violence. That's exactly what Vincent wants, to prove that Brian's too weak to protect anything, including me. Then what do you suggest? We ask him nicely to stop bombing innocent people. Rosa stepped forward, and despite being a 50-year-old grandmother who barely reached Dante's shoulder, she somehow made him step back. You boys and your violence. Always the same. Someone punches, you punch back harder, then everyone's bloody and nothing's solved. She turned to Mitchell. What does Vincent actually want? Power. Control. The empire Brian's letting crumble. Then we give it to him. Everyone stared at Rosa like she'd suggested they all start speaking Mandarin. Explain, Dante said carefully. Brian's dying anyway, yes. And he doesn't care about the empire anymore. So we make a deal. Vincent gets the criminal enterprise. We keep the money and the South Side project. Everyone wins. Vincent bombed a coffee shop, Mitchell said. He's not interested in negotiations. He bombed it because he's scared. Scared men do stupid things. Smart women make those stupid things into opportunities. Rosa patted Mitchell's cheek. Your mother taught you to read in funeral homes, Mija. You can handle one scared gangster. The meeting was set for dawn at the old warehouse district, neutral ground where both sides could position snipers and pretend they weren't. Lucky Brian had refused to let Mitchell attend, which is exactly why she showed up anyway, with Rosa, Dante, and a recorder in her pocket that Jasmine had insisted she carry. Vincent was younger than she'd expected, maybe 35, handsome in the way of men who've never had to develop a personality because their looks opened every door. He had 6 men with him, all visibly armed. Lucky Brian had brought only Dante. He looked terrible, pale, with dark circles under his eyes that suggested he hadn't slept since the bombing. But his voice was steady. You wanted a war, Vincent. Here I am. I wanted you to remember who you are. Vincent's voice carried the particular arrogance of men who mistake cruelty for strength. "You're lucky, Brian. You don't fall in love with waitresses and play philanthropist. You take what you want and break anyone who stops you." "I'm dying, Vincent. In 5 years, maybe less, I'll be gone. What I do with my last days is my business. Not when it makes the rest of us look weak. Not when your charity case puts targets on our backs." Vincent's eyes found Mitchell. "The girl goes. The money comes back to the family. Or I burn everything she loves until there's nothing left but ash." "Counteroffer," Mitchell said, stepping forward before anyone could stop her. "You get the empire. All of it. The businesses, the territory, the reputation. Brian signs everything over to you today. Right now." Lucky Brian turned to her, betrayal flashing across his face. "Mitchell. In exchange," she continued, "you leave the South Side project alone. Completely. Forever. You get to be the big boss man you always wanted to be, and I get to save my neighborhood without worrying about bombs in the night. Deal?" Vincent studied her like she was a chess problem he couldn't quite solve. "And what does Lucky Brian get?" "Peace. And the knowledge that his last act wasn't building a bigger empire, it was making sure someone else could build something better." The silence stretched like a wire being pulled too tight. Somewhere in the warehouse, water dripped. Outside, the sun was rising, painting everything in shades of blood and gold. "Fine," Vincent said finally. "But if I catch you trying to expand beyond the South Side, if I find out you're using that money for anything except your little charity project." "You won't," Mitchell said. "Because unlike you, I actually mean what I say." Vincent smiled, cold and sharp. "We'll see how long that idealism lasts in the real world, sweetheart." After Vincent left, Lucky Brian turned to Mitchell with an expression that mixed fury and something disturbingly close to pride. "You just gave away my empire." "No," she said quietly. "I just saved your life." "You're welcome." Chapter 9, The Weight of Love. 6 months later, the South Side looked different. Not transformed, that would take years, but different in the ways that mattered. Chen's coffee shop had been rebuilt, bigger and better, with a community board where locals posted job opportunities and apartment listings. The condemned buildings on Maple Street were now affordable housing units with actual insulation and working heat. The playground had new equipment, installed by volunteers who showed up because they finally believed someone gave a damn. Mitchell stood at the playground's edge, watching children play on swings that didn't creak ominously. Rosa's grandson was among them, his new shoes already scuffed but still intact. "You did good, Mija," Rosa said, appearing beside her with 2 cups of Chen's coffee. "Your mama's watching. She's proud. I had $5 billion. It would have been hard to screw up. Money doesn't automatically fix things. You know how many rich people drive through here and don't see anything worth saving." Rosa squeezed her hand. "You saw. That's the difference." A black town car pulled up, not flashy, not threatening, just quietly expensive. Lucky Brian emerged, moving slower than he had 6 months ago. The heart condition was winning its war, visible in the careful way he walked, the shortness of breath he tried to hide. "He comes every week," Rosa observed. "Watch you work. Never approaches." "I know. Are you going to keep pretending you don't care?" "I'm going to keep pretending it's not complicated." Rosa snorted. "Love is always complicated, Mija. That's how you know it's real." She left Mitchell alone with her coffee and her choices. Mitchell found him sitting on a bench near the renovated basketball courts, watching teenagers play a pickup game with an intensity that suggested he was memorizing everything. "You're not subtle," she said, sitting beside him. "Never claimed to be." He didn't look at her, kept his eyes on the game. "I like seeing what you've built. Reminds me that not everything I touched turned to poison. How are you feeling?" Dying slower than expected, living faster than I planned. Now he did look at her, and his eyes held something raw. The doctors say I might have 7 years instead of 5. Apparently giving away your criminal empire reduces stress. Who knew? They sat in silence, watching the game. One of the kids made an impossible three-pointer, and his friends erupted in celebration. Such simple joy, the kind that existed because someone had cared enough to give them a safe place to find it. Vincent's running the empire into the ground, Lucky Brian said conversationally. He's making enemies faster than he can eliminate them. Give him 2 years and he'll be dead or in prison. That's not my problem anymore. No. It's mine. Or it would be, if I still cared. He leaned back, face tilted toward the sun. Funny thing about dying, it clarifies what actually matters. Turns out empires don't. But this? He gestured at the playground, the courts, the neighborhood slowly stitching itself back together. This matters. Brian. I'm not asking for anything, he interrupted gently. I know what we are and what we're not. You made that clear from the beginning. I just wanted you to know that these 6 months, watching you build something real from my blood money, have been the best months of my life. Even counting the dying part. Mitchell felt something crack in her chest. You can't say things like that. Why not? I'm dying. I've earned the right to say true things without worrying about consequences. Because, she stopped, struggling with words that had been building for months. Because you're not supposed to make me care about you. You're supposed to be the mob boss who gave me money and stayed in his lane. You're not supposed to show up every week and watch kids play basketball. You're not supposed to look at me like I'm the best thing you ever created, when all I did was spend your money. You did more than spend it. You gave it purpose. Gave me purpose. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. His palm was warm, calloused in unexpected places. I fell in love with you 12 years ago when you were a girl reading in the rain. I fell in love with you again watching you negotiate with Vincent like you were dismantling a bomb instead of my empire. And I'm in love with you now, watching you argue with city planners and shame landlords and build the world your mother deserved to live in. I can't, her voice broke. I know. And that's okay. I'm not asking you to love me back. I'm just asking you to let me love you from whatever distance you're comfortable with. Let me keep coming to watch the good you're doing. Let me die knowing I contributed to something that'll outlive me. He squeezed her hand. Can you give me that? Mitchell looked at their joined hands. I looked at the playground where children laughed. Looked at this complicated, dying man who'd built an empire on violence and was trying to end it with grace. You can come to the community meetings, she said finally. We have them every Thursday at Chen's. 7 p.m. You can watch, you can listen, but you don't get to make decisions. I wouldn't dream of it. And Brian? She met his eyes. Ask me again in a year. When the money's been spent and the neighborhood stable and I know for sure this wasn't just your elaborate deathbed manipulation. His smile could have lit the whole South Side. That's more hope than I deserve. Probably. But my mother used to say hope is what you give people when they've lost everything else. She stood, still holding his hand. Come on. Community meetings in an hour, and they're voting on the new health clinic. You might as well see democracy in action. Will there be coffee? Chen's Coffee. The best in the city. Then I'm in. They walked together through the South Side, through the neighborhood that was learning to breathe again, and for the first time in 12 years, Lucky Brian felt something he'd thought lost forever. He felt lucky. The end. Sometimes the people who've done the worst things are capable of the greatest change. Have you ever given someone a second chance and watched them transform? Share your story below, we'd love to hear it.